Welcome to Meet the Candidates 2018, a voter education program brought to you by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. My name is Angie Whitcomb, and I'm joined here today by Scott County Commissioner candidate, that's a mouthful, Michael Beard. Mike, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Angie, I appreciate the chance to be here, and thank you to the Chamber for making this possible.
You're welcome. To start the interview, why don't you tell our viewers at home a little bit about your background and what has motivated you to run for re-election?
Certainly. My wife Karen and I have lived in Shakopee for 32 years. We've been always pretty involved in the town because we raised 4 kids here. So through the school district, through our church, I joined the Chamber shortly after I came here in 1986. I've been a Chamber member for quite a while.
Thank you.
Actually served as president of the board. We called it president at the time for 2 terms back in the mid-90s, right after I completed my 4-year stint on the Shakopee City Council. That was a great learning experience. Being involved as an elected official, being responsible for budgets, for policy, things like that. When I came off the council, I continued my service on the Chamber Board, but also served 2 years as Chamber of the Derby Days. We had just resurrected it in those days, and it was still pretty much a largely community-driven event. Great fun, very exasperating, but very rewarding as well. In the 32 years I've lived here, I've done a few things. City Council, EDA Commission, as I mentioned, Derby Days in the Chamber. In between there, I had about 7 years where I bought some little printing and publishing companies. That is my background, how I worked my way through Bible college was in printing and publishing. So it lent itself to raising kids and keeping the mortgage payment and things like that going. But I cobbled 3 little companies together and ended up with 13 employees and a fun little company that I sold the year I ran for the Minnesota legislature in 2002. Something that wasn't in my life plan but became available, and through the encouragement of several others in the local party, I ran and won and served 12 years in the Minnesota legislature. I continued my community involvement while I was doing that, serving on the St. Gertrude's Board and then the Saints Foundation at St. Francis Hospital. I currently am on the Benedictine Health System Board of Directors out of Duluth. I ended my legislative career. I retired. I declined to run for re-election is the best way to say that. After the 2014 year, at which time the sitting county board member that represented Shakopee, Dave Menden, asked if I would consider running for his seat because Dave wanted to retire. Apparently Mrs. Menden was saying 70-something is long enough. Incidentally, Mrs. Beard is saying that after the next term, maybe that's long enough. But anyhow, I ran for the seat held formerly by Dave Menden and prevailed. It's been a real honor to be on the county board. It's way different than the Minnesota legislature, let me tell you.
I'm sure.
But I am so grateful for my legislative experience, Angie, because it's made me a more effective county commissioner, being able to go to St. Paul and Washington on a few occasions and advocate on behalf of things that are important to Shakopee, like transportation funding and lately Met Council reform. Boy, we need some Met Council reform. I've been in that fight. Now I'm able to go to St. Paul and work for and advocate for that. So anyhow, that's sort of my background. 4 adult children, 13 grandkids, and I hate to tell you, I've got 4 great-grandkids. It's an amazing,
fabulous,
an amazing life. While I was in the legislature, I chaired the Transportation Committee, served on several gubernatorial appointments, including Center for Transportation Studies, which I serve on to this day. And I'm able to use those connections and that influence and that knowledge as we craft transportation policy, tax policy, and how we fund these things here in Scott County, in Shakopee, the county seat. So that's a little about me.
Well, great. Well, thank you. So you've touched on a few issues, but in your time as county commissioner and as a resident, what do you see as the most pressing issues facing our county today, and what are your plans for addressing them? Good.
I'm glad to talk about that because Scott County is a well-run county. I mean, during the Great Recession, we were one of the few counties in the state that laid off very few people because we had the full cooperation of our bargaining units, our unions. The relationship between management and labor at Scott County is probably one of the best in the entire state. But going forward, we've got some other issues, and they're mostly related to the avalanche of regulations, particularly from the previous presidential administration, that we've had to deal with that drive up costs for everybody, and there's no money attached to those. So we get to contend with that with adding payroll to accommodate things Washington, and sometimes St. Paul tells us to do. We got to keep that under control, and we have to push back on that. And I think that's where some of my experience has been helpful, pushing back in St. Paul, the Met Council, and in Washington. We need to be able to accommodate the economic growth and the population growth that's coming, that's here, that's happening. It's happening. And we are one of the counties in the state that, like I tell my colleagues from other parts of the state, if you're going to have problems, you want to have the problems that Scott County is having. Because we're trying to expand roads, bridges, transportation options. We're trying to create infrastructure or keep growing the infrastructure, help facilitate orderly annexation and things like that, and do that all and keep our budget within the natural growth of the value of the county. And we've been largely able to do that. Keep continuing to do that is one of the things we have to contend with.
Great. Okay, moving on, Mike. How will the SMSes continued purchase of land in Scott County, along with new applications to put such land into trust, impact Scott County into the future? And what, if anything, should Scott County be doing in response to more land being put into trust?
Well, it is a fact that they are a sovereign nation. They assert their sovereignty, and that is a federal issue. We deal with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the United States Senate when we deal with our neighbors at the Midwakanen community. So anything that's happening there is not us versus them. It's our concerns expressed to the federal government, and the federal government asks, what's the impact? We're going to put more land into trust. Yes, there is an impact directly on our taxes, but it's very small. Because Minnesota is the only state in the union. This gets a little complicated. I'll keep it simple. We're the only state in the union that doesn't use a millage rate to determine taxes. We use a valuation, a tax valuation capacity. Only one of the states that does it. We're special that way. So when you take that value off of the total aggregate, everybody else's share goes up a half a point, a third of a point, something like that. Because all the land that's gone into trust now has been basically raw land. So the taxes it's paying, Angie, are very small. Having said that, about in the years 2002, 2001, the city of Shakopee and Scott County embarked on a long series of legal maneuvers that lasted almost 10 years, fighting a large trust application that the tribe had put in. And we spent almost $3.5 million taxpayer dollars. At the end of the day, the federal government said, no, everything looks fine, and approved the trust application. The only thing we accomplished besides paying $3.5 million for a 10-year lawsuit was really damaging relationships with our neighbors at the Midwakanen community. So we stepped back at that time, now this is just before I came on the board, and said, you know, there's got to be a better way. Our fight isn't with our neighbors at the Sioux community, not at all. In fact, I don't even know if there's a fight. They're asserting their legal rights. We react to that and work with that. So the better way is to say, let's be neighbors then. What are you trying to do at the Sioux community? Here's what we're trying to do at the county and the city. And we've developed a new peace in the valley kind of relationship. They're neighbors, they're friends. And the change in the attitude has been 180 degrees, and it's like a breath of fresh air. So yes, there's an impact, but I got to tell you, there's also a positive impact to what's happening. Having that community thrive and prosper benefits all of us. So there's an immediate little impact on the tax, the property tax, but in the larger economic activity that happens in Scott County and Shakopee, it's more than a winning proposition for all of us. Not to mention, they've been very generous, very thoughtful.
Very much.
Partnership agreements with Shakopee, with Prior Lake, on policing, on fire protection, on EMS services, working with Scott County on highway projects. They have been one of the nicest partners to work with, and one who's always willing to step up and say, look, we know it's going to cost you this much, but if we do this, we would like to pick up our additional costs. And yeah, it's just been a wonderful relationship. I don't want to damage, I want to continue to foster that kind of a relationship.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Moving on, talking a little bit about services. Research suggests that in many of the other metro counties, cities pay a larger share for county road improvements within their cities. They pay for police and fire radio maintenance, but do not receive the same cooperative service from the county without additional fees as compared to Scott County. So do you think cities should pay more for services that they receive from the county? trick question.
I would like to rephrase the assumption that you just made into, do I think that the taxpayers should pay more to have the city and the county provide the same services? And the answer is no, they shouldn't. Because, and this is one thing that I noticed and I really admired when I was a legislator working with Scott County and the cities, and now that I'm a county commissioner, is the basic principles that we operate from are pretty much the same. There is one taxpayer. It's that homeowner on 4th Avenue. That's where we all get our money. So if we're going to have a fire department or a snow plow and then make the city buy one, or we're going to build a street and we're going to tell the city you're going to pay more, the city doesn't pay more. That taxpayer on 4th Avenue pays more. And that just doesn't make any sense. We are revisiting our street cost share policy because it's got to reflect, I think, and I think the cities agreed with the county that if it's a benefit to the local city streets, the city probably should pick up a little more of that. But if it's a benefit to the regional system, the county should pick up a little more of that. So we are. In addition, we do several other things. We picked up several years ago, we started the county joint prosecution. So every city could drop their own prosecution department. That saves millions of dollars a year for the taxpayers in Scott County. We handle that all from the county attorney's office. The fiber assets, that I was a little late this morning because I was at a fiber meeting in Savage where we're talking about the fiber ring that we had the prescience to do about 15 years ago. We started it, recognizing that copper and DSL were already dinosaurs. It was all going to be fiber optic. This county has built out an amazing fiber ring in coordination with the cities and school districts. I note right here, Shakopee's, the next move that we're making right now with a company named Jaguar will save the city of Shakopee over $320,000 for expanded, increased reliability and speed, and they don't have to pay a nickel for it because of the way we put the county put the agreements together. By the way, you're about to get your fiber.
We already did.
You did. Way to go. I know you've been talking to me about this for some time.
6 or 7 years.
We also created the First Stop Shop so that not every town had to have their own economic development commission. They are doing an amazing job. Things as mundane as snowplow routes. Other counties, they fight with their cities about where the plows turn around. We just all got together and said, once our plow's on the road, if it's going down a Shakopee City street, it makes more sense for a county plow to keep going. Oh, by the way, the city over here should plow this little piece, mowing our ditches. There's just a dozen things we do because we recognize the number one principle is there's one taxpayer and we all dip our hands into their taxes.
Great, thank you. What is the current status of the relationship between Scott County and the individual cities within the county, and what will you do if reelected to build upon and strengthen these relationships?
Well, I'm a relational guy.
Yes.
I believe in going to coffee at Perkins or breakfast with Rose at Perkins in the morning, or Kay at Wampauck's, my two favorite places, because relationships are what this business is all about when we're serving the public. There are 7 cities and 11 townships. By and large, we all get along really well. This is one of the few counties in the state that has an organization called SCALE, where once a month, every Friday morning, we get together for coffee and donuts at Prior Lake City Hall, and we just get to know each other and talk about issues that are coming up. It has just been one of those things that keeps us connected and is a seedbed of ideas on how we can do things bigger, better, faster, cheaper that need to be done. Sometimes we also have discussions about should we be doing this. That's also a lot of fun.
A good question to ask.
I think, though, in the city I represent, Shakopee and Scott County, there are pockets of it doesn't work as smoothly as it could. I'm concerned about that, and I think we have an opportunity now to maybe hit the reset button. New city administrator here, new city engineer, the one that retired, great guy. We have a new city or county administrator coming. There's going to be a little change in regimes up there, which is one of the reasons I feel compelled to run for re-election. I want to make sure it's steady as she goes and we have that continuity going forward. But by and large, we do really well. A case in point this morning for people that call me and say, what's the matter with Shakopee? Why can't you get along with Scott County? But I watched the Scott County and the Shakopee IT guys give a joint presentation on this $320,000 savings for Shakopee. Oh, by the way, it saved the county $200,000. Nice. That $520,000 savings, that gets shared by that homeowner on 4th Avenue because it's money we didn't have to spend to increase the services that we needed to rebuild anyhow. those guys get along great. I mean, the parks guys get along great. I mean, it's just, there's so many areas we cooperate so nicely. I want to build off of that and make sure that we continue to coffee and donuts at Perkins and stay connected.
Okay, so you brought up taxes in several of your answers,
Yes.
and keeping them low for that homeowner on 4th Street.
Yeah.
How do you plan to keep the tax levy low while still maintaining adequate resources like infrastructure improvements and workforce?
Yes. You know, there's actually two things, or several things that are prominent with the county. We are the extension of the state. This is a sidebar. Health and Human Services,
Yep.
we're told what to do by the state and the federal government, and so we have to hire the staff to do that.
Yep.
But then there are core things that we do, like the sheriff, the jail. We provide the court building for the state. We have to hire the people to do that. 911 dispatchers, that's on our dime. Oh, by the way, we agreed that Scott County would aggregate 911 so the cities didn't have to have their own dispatch services. We do that all, and that was a joint decision by all 7 police chiefs and the sheriff's department to do that. Staffing that is harder than it looks. Now, these are good jobs with great pay, great benefits, but the problem we're having is that we hire the new kids, and anybody under 40 is a kid in my book. The new folks come on board, and it turns out it's not an 8 to 5 job. You have to work Saturday nights and Sunday mornings, and you have to work over the weekends and on Christmas, because most of our 911 calls come on those days.
And I want somebody answering the calls.
And you
on
want
those
somebody
days.
answering the calls, yes, on Christmas Day when somebody set the turkey on fire. That's an important thing. We're having a little struggle finding those people, and that's a bit of a challenge. But we're working with other things like the technology upgrades to allow our existing workforce to do more work for lower costs and maybe work from home in some cases. Now, it's kind of tough for 911 to work from home, but there are some case managers that could certainly do that. That's one thing we're trying to do. The other thing is we've got a capital improvement program. We're investigating building, aggregating about 5 sites we have around the county on the existing county footprint and building a new 4-story building there.
Oh, wow.
There's going to be money involved, but we're trying to play for 30 and 40 years down the road, so when yours and my grandkids are county commissioners and city council members, they'll look back and say, gee, I'm glad they built enough space and made this as efficient as possible. Those are things we're trying to do. The other issue is transportation. We passed the transportation sales tax, something that I made sure was in the legislation when I was chair of the committee, because we were not in something called CTIP. That's a long story, but we had the ability to help fund our own projects. What a blessing that's turned out to be. We thought it was going to be $6 million a year. It's been about $8.5 million a year. It's moved us to the head of the line on several projects like 169 and 41.
So good.
None of that money comes from our that doesn't come from the person that owns the property on 4th Avenue. Not on the real estate tax. It's paid for largely by all the people who come and visit Scott County.
Wow.
And it's been more successful than we even imagined when we went around to every city council and said, here's what we'd like to do, here's why we're doing it, would you support us? And they all did. So we have 4 years to run on that program because it's a sunset deal, another thing we insisted on. And 5 years from now, 4 years from now, the next commission will have to look back and say, pluses, minuses, win, loss, should we do it again? Should we let it sunset? How does it work? That's how we do this. The last thing is performance-based budgeting, Angie. It's boring. It makes CPAs sit up and say, wow, really? But the average person at home goes, what's this mean for my taxes? It means a lot because it keeps them flat. We're avoiding spikes. We're avoiding big drops by doing performance-based budgeting and looking out 3 to 5 years. We're able to keep the growth of the county budget about even with the valuation of the county, which means your tax rates actually go down. So it's trickier than it looks, but I've watched it work, and I got to tell you, it's a well-run county. One of the reasons I'm running for re-election is to keep that kind of engagement and hands-on management of the success we've had and make sure it continues through the transition to a new administrator and a new board.
Great, thank you. Is there anything else you would like to share with our viewers about why or what you need from them on November 6th?
What I need from them on November 6th is at least 51% of the vote, or 50% plus 1. That would be really appreciated. No, seriously, it has been an honor to serve. I've been in 3 different levels of government, serving our friends and neighbors here in Shakopee. As your county commissioner, as I'm going into sort of the autumn years of my life, it's so fun, it's so rewarding to be able to bring that life experience and those connections around the state to bear for the benefit of Scott County and for you, the neighbors. That means a lot of work. It's not just a Tuesday board meeting, but I'm on about, I think, 13 different committees that I represent you, the voter and the taxpayer, on around the metro area and at the state, from the Governor's Rail Task Force to the Minnesota Intercounty Association. Doing all that, not just so I can, get free coffee and donuts out of the deal. I'm doing that so I can represent you and so I can stand up for Scott County and bring back great ideas on how we can collaborate with those around us to do the core functions of government as efficiently and effectively as possible. If you'd vote for me again on November 6th, I'd appreciate it, and I promise you 4 more good years of engaged, involved leadership and representation on the Scott County Board on your behalf.
Thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you.